Today's guest is Laura Siddall. Laura is a decorated professional triathlete with multiple top 10 finishes at the Ironman World Championships. We discuss her comeback from her bike crash and head injury from Ironman Brazil last year, her training for Patagonman, where she took the win last December, and what she has coming up on the horizon. Hope you enjoy this episode.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Hey, Sid, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Great to chat and catch up again.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've last caught up, so I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. Just to kick things off, I'd love for you just take a minute to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm Sid or Laura Siddall. It's funny actually. I've been known as Sid for so long in the triathlon world and from like gap year and through university and things like that, but as you get older and you meet new people, it starts to get a little bit awkward. Like, do you introduce yourself as Laura or Sid now? So anyway, but yes, Sid is how I'm known. Professional triathlete over the long course distance, so full and half iron distance races. Based in Boulder, Colorado at the moment. Been here about a year. I would say I've been fairly nomadic throughout my professional careers, which I think is about 10 years kind of about now that I've been professional in the sport, which is crazy. But yeah, from the UK originally, moved to Australia with my corporate job at the time. And that's when I started triathlon. And then I've been San Francisco and then Christchurch, New Zealand, Girona, Spain, all over the place. And yeah, now kind of find myself in Boulder, Colorado with Julie Dibbons as my coach for the last four or 5 years now. And and the JD crew here.
Awesome. And not a bad place to train.
No, not bad. And I went through a period of living summer to summer. So New Zealand summer in the Southern Hemisphere and then Spain. And I had like the tag of like chasing summer. So almost since the pandemic, obviously that's changed a lot and not being able to get back to New Zealand. So I've had to sort of embrace the winter. So I think when I moved to Boulder last year, it was a bit of naivety. You know, I hadn't really been through a winter and particularly not a Colorado winter. And then this year I was like, okay, now I'm getting used to it. I'm on the trainer and I'm going to get snow and things like that. And it's going to be cold, but it's fine. It's beautiful. Like the mountains are amazing.
And if the sun's out, it's a great day to be training outside.
It is.
So,
yeah.
I will say most of the year is pretty great, except for I would say right around now.
Yeah.
Because we're like heading into April and when the rest of the country is like pretty warm in spring, like we keep bouncing back and forth.
Like I think
snowstorms.
Sunday is going to be, and I'm still in Celsius, but I think it's like 70 Fahrenheit on Sunday. And then on Monday we get snow again. So it's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
under 50 degrees on Monday with some snow. Yeah.
Yeah.
At night. So yeah, it's a tough time. This is not the consistent time of year to be training outside, but the great story. I also kind of curious, I know you've shared this before, but just you work in a corporate job for a bit. What was the like tipping point for you to get into becoming a professional triathlete?
Yeah. So I'm an engineer by background, long time ago now it feels, of having said 10 years as a professional athlete. And I did a gap year in the British Army before university, but got a transfer with my corporate job out to Australia and was on sort of a 2-year assignment out there. And having always played sport, was looking for something to do and was I used to run on the track and play netball, and through various friends from work, sort of started running, started swimming. They tagged me along for a charity bike ride. And then it was kind of like, oh, you should do triathlon. So triathlon's huge in Australia. I was living in Sydney, so I found a beginner's group course and, we're swimming at Bondi Beach and it's just amazing location. And just got into that as an amateur, was still very much doing the corporate career path. Found, I think because I've always done sport, and I always kind of have loved it as that hobby. And so I sort of getting more and more involved in triathlon as a hobby. And we had a fantastic group that we were training with in Sydney. And that was kind of my social circle as well. And I guess, just kind of progressed through the amateur ranks, mainly over the sprint and Olympic distance. And then, I guess one was lucky enough to win a couple of world titles as an amateur over that sprint and Olympic distance. And then people sort of started saying, oh, you should take your pro license and things like that. And for me, I wasn't really sure what that meant. Professional sport, it had always been the hobby. And that's very much growing up in the UK, sport was very much kind of the hobby. It wasn't the career path. And also then I had to kind of look into it going, okay, well, if I'm going to take my pro card, what does that mean? And I couldn't also take it over those sprint and Olympic distance, because at this point, I was quite late into the sport. I didn't start till I was 29. This was now kind of 34. To be a professional over that sprint and Olympic distance, you have to be, it's the 16, 17-year-olds, it's the government federations, it's going to the Olympics, and also I couldn't swim. Swimming was the weakest, so that was kind of the no. So that meant, okay, so what does it mean taking the pro card? It means sort of the middle and full distance of iron distance triathlon. And I think the tipping point, though, I just got to a point I guess, like I said, I'd always played sport. It'd been a huge part of my life, but I'd never fully committed to it because of this. It had always, the way I was brought up, it was always seen as a hobby. But, I represented like England at a junior level in athletics or track, I should say, over here, and also in netball, which is similar to basketball, but not quite. But had never really fully committed to the sport. And so I was then at a point in Australia where I was kind of like, well, you've kind of been given a third chance now, and there's an opportunity to follow your passion of what you've always loved doing. And I had a great job. I was on a expat or initially expat living in Australia salary, and then that changed a little bit as I changed jobs over time. But it was sort of a point, you're not getting any younger, and more of my headspace was thinking about the next training session, the next race, rather than, I guess, my job and my corporate path. And it was just one of those moments. To be honest, I didn't think hugely too much about it. I think if I kind of buried my head in the sand a little bit in doing that cost analysis of how much it would take to survive as a professional athlete without the corporate salary, because I kind of knew if I believed too much about that, I probably wouldn't make the leap. But yeah, basically just kind of got to that stage of going, like, I don't want to look back in 10 or 20 years time and think, what if, and I'd never given it a chance. So I'd won at that stage. I'd just come off the back of winning the Ironman 70.3 World Championships as my age group, but then the overall female amateur, I was the fastest overall female amateur, and then defended sort of the Olympic distance, which was back in London, which was amazing. And so, yeah, those two race results kind of went, okay, tipping point of let's give this a shot.
That's really neat. Right out the gate, were you able to get like sponsors right away to get started, or like what did that process look like?
No, at all. I mean, I was, obviously I had a corporate job, and I'd got some savings, and I had a house in the UK, which I ended up selling a couple of years later. But I moved from Australia, Sydney, Australia, to San Francisco to work with a coach at the time, which, I was pleased I did that move, but San Francisco is not exactly the cheapest place to live when you suddenly lack salary. And also, moving to the US, like nobody knew who I was. I was an amateur, just turned professional. I wasn't American. Everyone had sold me on the fact of, oh yeah, you'll pick up sponsors easily. Everyone in America loves like professional athletes. And I was like, I was lucky as an amateur. Obviously I had the corporate job, but I won a competition. So I was supported by Wiggle for the year. That online, I'm not sure if it's still around, but it used to be an online kind of selling components and equipment. So they kind of supported me as a amateur. So that was amazing opportunity. But yeah, no, moving to the US, and you're pretty much like, yeah, zero sponsors. You've really got to kind of make a name for yourself. And that's really hard because you're transitioning from amateur to professional. That's a huge leap. Like, I don't think people realize I think people look at their results on paper and they look at how many pros they beat and they think they can be a pro. And I was very aware that the amateur race is very different to the professional racing. And yes, like, you know, at the 70.3 Worlds in Las Vegas, I was first overall amateur. And yeah, I did beat a fair few pros, but I was in a completely different race and I was very aware of that. So there's this huge transition from an amateur to professional, and you kind of get caught up initially into like, I've got to get results, I've got to get, you know, you've got to get sponsors, how am I going to survive? Well, actually you kind of want to go, just put your head down, adjust to the training, adjust to the kind of the new life, and the results hopefully will come, and then you can get your name out, and then you can start approaching for sponsorship and support and stuff like that. I think the myth that a lot of amateurs believe that as soon as you turn pro, you just have like sponsors or brands or partners just like, oh yeah, we'll sponsor you, you're a pro. And it's like, no, it's not the case.
Your Instagram inbox is always full.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You're just battering away offers at the door. I wish.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at you now, and not in person, but on camera, and you got a full NASCAR jersey on you now. So you have the sponsors, right? So was, you know, the career straight up and to the right the whole time, or how would you describe this last 10 years?
Oh gosh. Nothing that I could ever have imagined, because I, you know, as a little kid, whilst I was, you know, you have that dream of racing at, you know, competing at the Olympics and things like that, but I would never have kind of thought I was going to be a professional athlete, let alone in triathlon, let alone, and then sort of living all around the world. And even when I turned professional, I had no like plan of like, this is what I achieve. I just wanted to think like, okay, if I give it a full 100% attention, how good can I be for myself, sort of thing. I would say it's definitely been up and down. Life sport is, you know, the highs are high, the lows are lows. It's also what makes the highs sweeter, so to speak, when you've kind of got those lows. And obviously it's all relative. It's sports, you know, it's not a critical industry of the world, so to speak. You know, we're very lucky to get to do or to choose to follow our passion. I'd say like the first few years when I first became a pro were pretty tough. I struggled with being in America, in San Francisco, and not much money or sponsorship, and you just felt like you were hemorrhaging cash and you weren't really getting results that you kind of felt you wanted or needed, or the training reflected. I mean, I think it was probably 2, maybe 3 years. When did I get my first? 2016, I think I won a half and that was my first. And then 2017 was my first full distance Ironman win. So that took, and I had a lot of second places between, which was kind of like, which is awesome. It's podium, but it's frustrating kind of thing as well. And then you always just, the highs are always like the good results and the training and when things are going well. And then it's always, lows in terms of, you know, I was pretty lucky in the early years and throughout my life and career in sport. You know, I'd been really lucky with injuries and illness. And then that all changed in 2019. And then I seem to have had this sort of roller coaster since then. I broke my collarbone coming off my bike, just in a training ride, had it plated, got it. So that kind of then went through that rehab for the year, got it unplated at the end of the year. It was fixed. It then stress fractured the following year randomly. So that kind of went through that. Then we went through the pandemic. And so, everyone sort of had to adjust to that. And then I guess, the hardest thing actually, probably if I think about it now, was like this last sort of, what are we now? Probably 10 months in. I got hit by a car in a race in May last year. Knocked unconscious. Don't remember anything about about what happened, and suffered a brain bleed. And so, that took me out for kind of, most of last year in trying to rehab and recover that. And I'm not sure I don't think you, like, people ask me now, are you fully recovered? Are you back? Like, yeah, I'm back training and racing, but I don't think you ever return to who you were before a big accident, a big injury, and stuff like that. You can still be good, but it's just a different person, different way. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. And would love to chat about that just for a second. And first off, before going too far, like, you've clearly had many mountaintops like in the sport, which is really cool. It's like, and I'd love to hear what you think are your other mountaintops, like 2 top 10 Kona finishes.
Yeah.
Incredible. Like, really cool. And so you've like seen the top end of the sport. And I think, and also this win last year at Patagonman is like a really cool, like, notch in the belt too.
Yeah.
But you did that after this injury. And so, you had, it was about 6 months from like that injury to Patagonman when you like won again. But yeah, just kind of talking about that. Obviously, we don't have to talk about the politics side of like the bike crash in an Ironman, because I feel like that was a conversation that happened quite a bit last year. But what did that recovery look like? First off, you do a great job of like documenting it on Instagram. So I encourage everybody to go back and read that. But what did that recovery look like from kind of accident to just getting started again?
Yeah. So I suffered a brain bleed, and so they kept me in hospital overnight in Brazil. So I was in Brazil. And then the next day they were happy that the bleed hadn't deteriorated. So I didn't have to have operational surgery to release any pressure in the brain, which was good. And I was cleared to fly home or back to Boulder. But then obviously I wasn't allowed to drive, no sport, no exercise, kind of pretty much nothing. I was allowed to walk kind of for 20 minutes or so a few times a day, just to be active and actually to get outside and that fresh air. And then the rest of it was kind of lots of, napping, resting. I was really lucky at the time. I think I didn't have any huge light sensitivity or noise sensitivity. I wasn't having to sit in the dark sort of thing, but the fatigue and energy levels was a big thing. So and it's funny, like, I know a lot of professional athletes are very good at napping. I am not. It's not one of my strengths, but I was like, lying down and napping several times a day for half an hour. So I went from 30 hours a week of training, being at probably one of the fittest I've ever been, coming off the back of a great year in 22 with those 2 top 10s, which again I would have never have dreamt of, but Julie was amazing in helping to get me those results. Coming into then 23 and being sort of at this peak fitness going into this race, 30 hours a week to then like 0. Mm-hmm. And having always done sport as a kid, always played sport, doing something, I don't think I've ever had 0 sports in my life. We have off seasons, but you're still, the nature of why we do sport and we love it, we're still active people. So if even in an off season you might be gravel riding or you're still like hiking or doing a different sport, you're still being active because that's just who we are. So I went to like literally nothing. My coach Julie was great. She would pick me up and take me to swim sessions, and I'd sit on the side of the pool just to get kind of out and out of the house and social engagement. And I started, like, I would go to the run sessions with the group and I would just go and walk while they went off and running. I also, my coach Julie also let me borrow her dog. So I had my own to take for walks, which was amazing. So I had Dakota as my therapy dog, and he was awesome and just like helping like get out and about. But so had to have various tests again. When I was back in Boulder, concussion tests and that sort of thing. And I tell the story, it's quite funny. They give you a questionnaire to fill in, and it's kind of like, are you sleeping more than normal? I'm like, well, yes, you've told me to rest. You told, I can't do anything else. And it's like, are you are you more tired than normal? I'm yes. Are you more emotional than normal? And it's just like, I'm getting, are you more irrational? And I'm like, yes, stop fucking asking me questions. And, things like, I'm also a 43-year-old female, my hormones are all over the place. Like, I don't know what's what. So that's quite funny. And they obviously test sort of eye movement and things like that. But then we took it pretty steady, like, because the nature of the injury, there's a brain injury is so hard. There's not that much research around it. It's different for everybody. Some people don't suffer any side effects. Some people suffer horrific side effects. Some people, it doesn't happen until 2 years further down the line. But I had a great team with Julie and Jared, another sort of physiologist we work with, and Lawrence Van Lingden here in Boulder as well. Just working with them, and took it pretty steady. And so the first thing was getting all clear to kind of get back on the bike, but on the trainer. Super easy, and obviously monitoring any signs of headaches or eye fatigue. So that was the other thing. I wasn't allowed to, no screens, no laptops, no TV. So that, that's the other thing. When you're resting, we often either you're on social media scrolling, or you put a Netflix, put Netflix or Apple or put a film on. Well, I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't read. I read off a Kindle. So I got really into audiobooks because that was kind of the only option. And that was the thing of like monitoring headaches and fatigue, eye fatigue. So started back on the bike, on the trainer, like just super easy stuff. Did that for a few more weeks, and sort of was able to get the all clear to ride outside, but flat, not many corners, all that sort of thing, just in case you had that sensory overload. I can't remember whether I can't remember whether I started swimming before I started running. I'm not sure which way around on that.
Your total off time was around 5-6 weeks?
It was a good 6 weeks, I think, of doing pretty much nothing. And then like that build back up of easy sessions on the bike. Like the first running session I did up Boulder Creek Canyon in here, which is uphill, which people might think is odd, but it was easy running uphill and then walking back. And that was trying to reduce the oscillation. The first time I got back in the pool, that was very, very bizarre. I mean, it was just like an out of body weird experience. Again, I'm not a swimmer anyway, and having that long out of water and just nothing was connected. It was such a bizarre feeling. And again, I think I only swam like 500 meters for the first swim. But by the end of it, I was able to flip turn with no issues. So that was kind of a good thing. And then, just steadily built things up. But what we did find was, because then we kind of we're looking ahead, and Kona and races, and I'd obviously planned to qualify for Kona in Brazil, and that didn't happen. And the last chance to qualify was Ironman Mont Tremblant, which was the end of July, I think. So we kind of started training towards that, but fortunately, Ironman gave me a wild card for Kona, and that meant that because we were kind of forcing things to get there, and we were kind of started, although we'd been really careful to start with, we'd sort of started to ramp up probably quicker than we'd all have liked. I'd find I'd do a run session that I used to do, I've done before, that wouldn't bat an eyelid at, and then it would wipe me for the rest of the day, and I'd be like on the couch, not able to move, because just the energy levels and fatigue was so different after the accident. So then fortunately, when Ironman gave me the wild card, we could I pulled out of Tremblant, and we just took out all the structure, took out all the stress of that pressure of trying to get back to a race, and just went, right, let's just go in. And this is where Boulder was amazing. Like I just went, and Julie was great. She was like, let's just go up into the mountains and we'll just ride our bikes for 4 or 5 hours in the mountains. And there's no structure. We'll just get the work done through the terrain and stuff. There's no none of that extra. It was all about trying to reduce the pressure and the stress, which is a cumulative, and the energy then expended by my brain, I guess. So
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, especially from an elite athlete standpoint, you don't expect to be like knocked that far back,
no.
Especially when you're in a race. And then,
Yeah.
From there, spending the next 5-6 weeks literally on a couch. I mean, is that fair to assume that's probably one of the lowest emotionally that you've been in the sport, or?
So it was really interesting. Obviously, I think at the time, like you're low, you've got a whole host of emotions. There's frustration, but then you're trying not to get too angry and put blame on it, because that doesn't help either. But I think almost that first phase is kind of, okay, if you have a good team around you, it's like, okay, what can I do? And let's be really positive about what I can do and have that. And because you kind of start having that plan going back. And if you've got enough people to keep you occupied and entertained, able to do stuff in a support network, it's good. And I think then I was able to put that, it's different though. Like, it's not quite as easy, almost like a broken bone. God forbid, I don't want another one again, but it's a very structured process of recovering. Like, it takes 6 weeks to heal, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas with the brain, it's kind of unknown. But I feel I handled that first bit and that lead up back to Kona pretty well. But I think that was quite a big, I don't think we appreciated how much energy mentally and physically that took out of me to get me back and then race Kona. And then it's felt a little bit like a struggle kind of ever since. And that's been the harder bit, to kind of, I think I felt like getting back and racing in Kona, it was almost like closing the door on the chapter, and that, I was back to normal and things were great and it was all good. But I don't think we'd appreciated how much that had probably taken out of me. And so actually then the last 6 months have actually been sort of harder from that respect, because you don't have the side effects as such, but there's still something there. And yet you're struggling to kind of, with the energy levels and with that motivation and things like that. So,
I guess it really puts things in perspective too.
Yeah.
After an injury like that. And some of the things that you don't expect, like what you mentioned, like the expectation was get to Kona, have a great race, and things are going to be up from here.
Yeah.
And like to then experience maybe more of the like mental, like low parts after that is probably like almost harder to deal with, just because you expected it to be the opposite.
It is. Yeah, it is. And like the mental side of it is so difficult, because again, like I said, a physical injury, you can feel it, you can try and treat it and that sort of thing, but the mind games and the energy levels and the fatigue is so different, because you second guess yourself all the time, and you're like, should be able to get on with this and that sort of thing. So it's a tricky one to manage.
Yeah. Well, so good racing Kona. Do you want to talk about Kona at all before we move on to the?
I mean, I think I was, given the time we had, like, I can't, obviously as an athlete, you always want to be higher. Like, you always want to do better. And obviously I had the 2 top 10s the year before, and it would have been amazing and I think, if shoulda, woulda, coulda, if the accident hadn't happened, I had a good chance at replicating those results. That's not how it works, and that's fine. You deal with the cards you dealt. I think Julie did an amazing job at getting me back to a place where, considering the circumstances, I had a great day. Yes, would I like to be a bit higher? For sure. But considering like those last 6 months leading into the race, I can't really complain. And I was just super stoked to be back on a start line and to have that chance to race against the best in the world in Kona, and in an amazing year that it was. So yeah.
Just being back in the environment and culture probably brought a lot more life back. But then you also had a great race at Patagon. a couple of weeks later. What was that experience like? Because that's a whole different beast.
That was crazy. And I'd kind of picked that at the start of the year. Just thought, oh, if I do Brazil and Kona, it'll be a great way, hopefully having a great year, to then sort of just do something different at the end of it. Bit of an adventure down in Patagonia. And it truly was that. It definitely does what it says on the tin. So it's an iron distance race. It's A to B across the country. You jump off a boat in the dark into 8 degrees C. Well, it was 8 degrees C for us. So I think that's 45, 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Their cutoff. So it's meant to be sort of a 3.8K swim. And the temperature is normally 10, 11 degrees C. So around that 50. It was particularly cold this year. So because it was so much colder, they cut the swim in half, which I was fine with. I was like, I'm okay.
Runner's dream.
Yeah. So you jump off a boat in the dark, and then ride. It's about 180K approximate across the country over just amazing terrain. And then the marathon, again, it's slightly long. It's like 44 kilometers. It's all off road. It's all on trail. It's sort of 13 miles of uphill first and then 13 miles downhill. And you finish sort of on the other side of the country. We had, and it's relatively self-supported. So you need a crew. So I had a great friend, Sonia, and her husband, Walter, had come out to help crew for me. But the week leading up, we'd had on the bike, you're pretty much for 150 kilometers, you're climbing. So the first bit's sort of more gradual, but then you hit this national park and you have to climb up over this pass. And then the last 20 kilometers to T2 is a fast descent. But in the week, they'd had snow on the top of the pass. I hadn't seen the top of the mountains. It was snowing, it was raining. It was like the worst weather they've ever had. It was just I was like, holy shit, what have I got myself into? I knew it was going to be an adventure. I knew the water had been cold. I'd been swimming in Boulder in in a lake here, and I'd got the De Boer Norseman. So I had a thermal hood, and a sleeveless body kind of underneath. Then the thermal wetsuit. I'd got gloves. I'd got boots. So literally, sort of this much of your face is clear. So I was actually kind of relatively okay with the swim, although, like I said, I was very happy it was half the distance. But I was really worried about then. It was the conditions on the bike. It's super windy in Patagonia as well. So yeah, and luckily on race day, we just, having been miserable weather all week, we were incredibly lucky. It was cold. So like I said, the water was 8 degrees and we had a 2K swim, but it was an amazing, they put you on the boat in the dark and you don't really know where you're going out to in the fjords. And you're jumping off the back, and that, the call just comes to say, as soon as when they give the signal to jump, you've got to jump because the athletes are behind you. So you jump into the water and then you swim out to sort of where the start line is. And I just did a 360 turn, and the sun was coming up. And for the first time, I saw the boat, which was all lit up. It's this big car ferry. And then behind that was these snow-capped mountains and just this clear sky that was just amazing. And I was just like, that's it. That's all I needed. I came here and I've seen, that's an incredible view, and kind of almost doesn't seem to matter what happened in the day. She said naively, with 10 hours to go, sort of thing. And we were so lucky we had blue sky all day, which is unheard of. Normally they get weather changes coming in. It was still cold. So the air temperature was sort of 5 degrees C. So 40 degrees on the bike. So whilst it was blue sky, it was still I was racing. I did a full kit change in transition. And so put cycling kit on, had leg warmers on. I had boots over my shoes with heat packs in them. I had gloves with heat packs in. I had a Gore-Tex jacket, and I had a space blanket down my front as well. And I kept that on. The only thing I took off as I started to climb was the space blanket. I took out, and then everything else I kept on for the whole bike ride.
Yeah.
And then did a full kit change in T2 for the run, and the run was also had to be. So we saw our crew in T2, but then the next time we would see our crew was at 30 kilometers into the race, and we were told there were 2 aid stations, but it was quite unclear exactly where they were going to be. So basically, you had to go self-supported. So running jacket, I had a jacket in the back. I had all my nutrition and drinks, and yeah, talk about markings and stuff. The first half of the marathon is uphill predominantly, and the first 8K is on like a sheep track, so to speak. So very narrow, very sandy. Unfortunately, I was glad I downloaded the course onto my Garmin, because it kind of was marked, but sporadically it just had sort of flags attached to random like trees along the way, so you had to kind of keep your eyes open on that. And then after sort of 10K, you hit this gravel road, and then it was just straight following this gravel road. But I think the run was the most amazing, because you had this blue sky, you were running around lakes, you were running around that were like snow-capped mountains in the background, and you didn't see anybody. I saw one man and his dog, and a farmer and his dog, and that was like for 2 hours of running. That was me, the only person I saw. And then 30K, Sonia she'd ridden up from the finish, which you were allowed to do, and then they can join you for the last 14 kilometers. Cool. She rode a bike, and we did the last bit, and then you get to the finish line, which was another story. But yeah, it was an amazing experience.
It sounds like unlike any other race out there in the world.
It is. It's truly unique. Like it's such a local event as well. And I think having to be supported by your own crew adds another element. And it's always cool. Like you're on the bike and you see all the different crew vehicles like leapfrogging, and you can work out, like, you try like, okay, how far ahead am I, or who's in front? Because you see, and everyone's super supportive, like from every vehicle. And just, doing an A to B type race in that location. And then I was lucky, I got to spend a few days traveling around, exploring afterwards. And it's a stunning part of the world.
Yeah. You got to get the win and then enjoy Patagonia a bit. That's pretty special. It's a good way to end a year too, a tough year.
Yeah, I think so. I think it kind of was a good, like, having got back for Kona, that was obviously a big goal. And then just having this, I was going to do it anyway, to like finish off the year of doing something fun. And then it became a little bit more of a like, if I can get myself back to fitness and back on a start line, I think this will be a kind of a good way to end off the year and hopefully, be back out racing.
Yeah. You mentioned it earlier, still kind of working through some of the injury, it sounds like, even right now. But as far as the body goes, the body pretty healthy at this point?
Yeah, generally. I mean, it's getting older. I think that was the other thing. I think I'd been holding off age from, so to speak, for a long time. And I feel I was doing pretty well at still managing training and being able to compete at a pretty big level. And then I think when you have something like that happen, I think it was like, so the wave of age like caught up with me. And so it was like, oh no, you are actually kind of getting older. And so you just had to adapt things a little bit different. But touch wood, physically and stuff like that, the body's pretty good still at the moment.
That's great. Did you, last question about the injury, like, did you learn anything? Are you taking anything with you from the injury to like training now?
I think probably one of the things for me was actually like the resting in the day, like, and how that actually did affect my mood and energy levels in a positive way. So like I said, I've never been one that's been great at sleeping and not napping. And I know most people will think, well, isn't that what you should be doing as a professional, like resting and recovering and napping during the day? And I find that hard, I think, from just being in the corporate world and corporate background. I always feel I need to be doing something and justifying everything. But one of the things I did notice was, I think, just taking that time and resting and recovering more. And I think that's what, you talked about, was it a really depressive time or dark time of that injury. And and it was obviously to some extent, but actually because I was resting, I found that my mood and energy was actually in a good place unusually. So it's very easy when you get back into life properly that those learnings or those habits just slip again. But I'm trying to be better at taking the time in the day, again, an audiobook or a good book, or just going to bed early, switching off at night, and trying to, embrace that side of things. So that's probably one of the, I mean, I always knew that the sleep and the rest recovery is important, but I think when it was so obvious, it was like, oh, actually, even though I'm dealing with this traumatic injury, I actually feel in a really good head space, and because I think I'm rested and I've got sleep and I've got energy and stuff like that, and it actually puts you in a better mood.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great takeaway. I feel like, that, and even limiting screen time, even though you had to back then, always things that are
beneficial. And it's a really great excuse when you forget people's names and you forget things as you get older. I can just blame it on my brain. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I had a brain injury. I can't quite remember that.
Car crash. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that you can joke about it now, but that was a very serious, injury and crash as you were going through it. But no, it's good to see you joking about it at this point. And also, I mean, just kind of transitioning just a little bit here. Obviously, I think you're one of the earliest athletes we started working with Lever, and got to be 4 years ago or so now when we met.
I think it was kind of 2020.
I think so.
Back end. I think I suffered I think the first was off the back of injury. I think I had a slight calf strain, and so used the lever to be able to start running again with that calf injury. And to be honest, at the time was very much like, I'm going to sell this on to the physio, and I was in Girona at the time, or pass it on to somebody. I don't need this once I'm recovered from injury. And found with my coach Julie, we found it was such a good beneficial tool to just have in like that, like your swim paddles or your buoy, your swim buoy, like it was, and your trainer on the bike. Like suddenly the lever was like, actually, this is really valuable, not just for coming back from injury or injury rehab, but actually in day-to-day training, especially with the load that we do for full distance. Yeah, and
I find that interesting too. So we've had the company almost 5 years now, and honestly, even us, we thought we were going to be mainly like an injury recovery tool, and I feel like from even on our side, we've noticed like there's a maturity aspect to training with body weight support. Like most athletes do come in using it from an injury standpoint. And then kind of there's like this maturity curve of like, oh wait, this actually is very beneficial from a performance standpoint and a recovery standpoint. What have you learned over the last 4-ish years or so? And how are you incorporating it now?
Yeah. So obviously like the injury thing is huge, like being able to rehab from an injury. I've had a little bit of a hip hamstring issue over the years, and so it's been great from that perspective. But I think that's then morphed and molded into using it as a great, so especially when you are building up the training load for a full distance race and you're still want to keep miles, but it's just so often we would use it. Like I would have, like say on a Sunday, I'd have a big run in the morning, and that might be intervals and stuff like that. They'd be outside. And then in the evening, I would jump on the treadmill with the lever and do like 40 minutes, just super easy. Or maybe because of the body weight, you can kind of go at a faster pace, but your heart rate is still low. So you're still getting the neuromuscular movement of the legs, but you've actually just taken out some of that impact and fatigue. So that was a huge way we're using it in terms of those double run days. And then as well, again, when you're building up a load, just as for a recovery run as well, on whatever day, a Monday or something like that, jumping on again on the treadmill with the lever, super easy, and just having that, bit better support. So that's
cool. Yeah. And that's what I love about like when we say easy, it is easy heart rate wise, effort wise, but you're getting the turnover that would not be easy outside. So being able to turn over is super beneficial.
And the other thing I found when I started using was actually yes, you're in the shorts and you're kind of strapped in with everything. But to me, it made me focus more on technique as well. So that you didn't get, because you're super conscious, like you are strapped into something, but don't get lazy. So actually, I think not only was it good on that recovery and that those additional miles and stuff in the legs and the conditioning, but actually it forced me to even more focus on posture and technique when running. And I think that translated well into then outside running and racing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that we don't talk about enough is
No,
the
yeah.
form aspect of it and the
Yeah.
technique aspect of running and how running with lever does change that. So that's really cool to hear. And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Have you seen any like specific benefits over the last handful of years of using it? I mean,
I would say I'm running better than I ever have been.
mm,
Like in the last few years, my running feels better than ever. Yep, there's probably various factors that go into that with coach and training, but lever is one of those of being able to keep the running up more consistently on those days where, yeah, you've got a bit of a niggle, but you just want to protect it. But it's not you have to be, I want to caveat that I'm not saying run through injuries, like obviously get
yeah.
the full assessment, but when it's not, there's a little bit of fatigue, you're just a bit tired, it's been a valuable way of just keeping that consistency, which I think is so important for us training. So, and yeah, I think over the past few years, my running has been the best it ever has.
That's really cool. And I definitely do agree. I think the consistency is like a huge aspect to kind of building fitness throughout every single training block. Even, if you have to take a couple weeks off,
Yeah.
that really does set you back. But
Especially
we had
older.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. I think our tagline like last year or something was like consistency over everything, right? And just being able to consistently get the volume in that you need. Even if you have a niggle, and we're both, there's asterisks to that. Don't run through stress fractures and pretty crazy injuries, but there's a lot of things that you can run through. And a lot of PTs actually recommend you run through, especially if they're like tendon related, because
Exactly.
you
Like
want
a
to.
bit of loading is actually
Exactly.
beneficial for the healing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's great. And I feel like this is really good advice, especially since you've been using it for a while now, like 4 years.
And
That's
I've traveled with it all over. Like it would, yeah.
You have the most traveled lever.
It has.
For sure.
I do have the most traveled lever. If it had its own passport, I think it would be fully blocked out. And I feel like it's like, I joke with friends, like it's like a big baby bouncer. Like the baby bouncers that go in the door. So I feel like I love running. I don't particularly enjoy running on the treadmill, but having a lever system just makes it a whole different experience. So yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more purposeful to the training session on the treadmill for sure. Yes, we are deep into the Jolly Jumper phase with our kids. So no, it's great. Yeah, no, this is awesome. Obviously we're in end of March, early April now. Like, what does the rest of the season look like for you?
Yeah, so I've just been over back to New Zealand, and I did a couple of races over there. Partly also because I used to live in New Zealand pre-pandemic and then left New Zealand for what I thought was 5 weeks for a training camp in the States, and then the world shut down with COVID, and I wasn't able to get back. And so a couple of friends, I should say, have been very kindly looking after all my shit that's been still in New Zealand. So and they kept sort of saying, are you ever coming back? Should we just sell this? So I kind of decided, this year was the right year to get back to New Zealand and race a couple of my favorite races down there. So Challenge Wanaka and then Ironman New Zealand. And then also I got to go back to Christchurch and just sort out all my stuff and catch up with good friends that I haven't seen for, 4 years now. So I got back to Boulder 10 days ago or so. I did take some time after Ironman New Zealand, just took some time off, enjoying just being back in New Zealand, and also just with last year, sort of we built into Kona, and then I didn't really stop, which kind of was the plan, but didn't really stop from Kona, going through to Patagon, going through to then the early season races. So now we've sort of taken a bit of a break, which is also been really difficult because everyone else is ramping up ready to start their season. And, it's so exciting this year with the T100 and then the Ironman series, and everyone's, they're coming up to peak and I'm like starting again at this bottom and having to regain fitness again. So yeah, just building up steady. I've signed up to race Challenge Roth again in Germany, which is one of my favorite races. So that's in July. I'm gonna not huge plans as such for the rest of the year. I just need to see how the next couple of weeks go, getting back into training again after the last year, and then see what other races get put on the calendar for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm super excited to keep following you and see what the season holds for you this year. What's the best way for people to follow along?
Yeah, easiest is Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active. So LM Sid on Instagram, but I am on Twitter, or X, I should say, and Facebook as well. Have a personal and an athlete page. I know Facebook is for the old people these days. I think I think so. I think even Instagram's for the old people these days. I think everyone's on TikTok, which I haven't yet. TikTok or YouTube, and I'm not yet kind of got there, but Instagram's probably the best place to follow.
Yeah, I haven't made my way to TikTok yet either.
No.
So you're not the only one.
I did a TikTok dance with my niece during lockdown when we were stuck in the UK, and I think everyone was just bored out of their heads trying to do stuff, and TikTok dances and crazies went off the charts. So that's my only claim to fame on TikTok.
Yeah. Just a little plyometrics. Never hurt anybody,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's great. Well, really excited to follow the season, and thanks for being on. Sid.
No, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about incorporating the lever system into your training, follow us on Instagram @Lever Movement, or even follow me on Strava to learn how I incorporate lever into my training for ultras. Until next time, keep running.